Thank you for being a part of this service. Happy Sunday. Happy June. We have a new month, we have a new series, and we have lots of things in store for you. And with that, I invite you now to say with me, divine love through me blesses and multiplies all the good I am and have, all the good I give and receive. I am prosperous now, and so it is. And now, in this moment, I invite you to take a few deep breaths. Relax your body, relax your mind. Let everything go for the moment. If you're so inclined, go ahead and close your eyes right now. Put your day and your week aside. And in this moment, in this time, be here now. Universal love enfolds me. Universal wisdom inspires me. Universal spirit enlightens me. Universal power encircles me. I am one, and all is well. As we begin the inner healing process, let me invite you to relax in quiet confidence, opening yourself to the miracle-working higher power. Now symbolize the unity of your thinking and feeling nature by touching your chest with your right hand, and let my words act as your own for your own inner healing, acceptance, and receptivity. I acknowledge that there is a power, intelligence, and wisdom greater than my own. I am in the midst of it, and it is in the midst of me, sensitive and responsive to my every thought, word, action, and feeling. I now make this true for myself by stating aloud, I acknowledge. Acknowledging the higher power working through my life, I admit that I am personally responsible for solving my own problems, while being guided and assisted by something greater than myself. As I am ready to surrender the conflicts of my ego to the wisdom of the infinite presence, I simply speak these words. I surrender. Knowing that forgiveness is the key to unconditional love and the feeling of heaven, I now unconditionally forgive anyone and everyone who has ever injured me in any way, real or imagined. And I now forgive myself for all of my mistaken judgments and their resulting actions. From my deepest level of understanding, I now say, I forgive. Realizing that I continually experience the effects of my own thinking, I now choose to allow this higher power to recreate me deeply, filling my mind with thoughts that are only positive, constructive, loving, and beautiful. I call upon this divine inflow by stating aloud, I choose. I now center upon that one special idea that I'm willing to accept as real for me in this coming week. In visualizing that idea as already acted upon and brought to pass, in seeing my idea become a fact of my experience, I enjoy the happiness and peace of my thought fulfilled and gratefully speak these words: I accept. Knowing that I have an everlasting place in the midst of the power that sustains all creation, as well as the support of all those around me, I allow myself to relax in the peace of fulfillment and gratitude and say, I release. Now, in my mind's eye, I envision the presence of someone near and dear to me. This can be a friend, a family member, a teacher or mentor, someone who has touched my life in deep and loving ways. Someone who may not be physically present in the room with me this morning. I turn toward that image in my mind's eye and say, I'm grateful for the good in your life. Now I open my eyes, turn to the world around me, and joyfully speak to anyone physically present in the room or virtually on this broadcast, and share in confidence and gratitude in saying, I'm grateful for the good in your life.
I have a lot to tell you this month. This is a series called Healed, Whole, and Holy. And we're going to cover a number of different items following last month's series on the 5 steps of spiritual mind treatment, or the keystone really of our spiritual practice. And we pull material. Okay, I pull material. No, we all pull material from people in different faith traditions. Lately, you heard a Nichiren Buddhist bishop in dialogue in a soul session. We had several presentations of Judaism around different holidays here recently. This month I want to introduce you to a Christian writer by the name of Madeleine L'Engle. Madeleine L'Engle wrote A Wrinkle in Time. You probably have read that. There was a movie not long ago. And I've shared with some of you, she taught at the school I attended. But I never had classes with her. She taught the older kids, but she was around. And we knew her as Mrs. Franklin back in the day. Well, she wrote a book of essays after her fiction writing career called Walking on Water, Reflections on Faith and Art. And I want to read you a passage out of this, and then I'm going to riff on it for the rest of my allotted time in some ways, relative to what's going on in the world and relative to the time of year. She says this: one of the many sad results of the Industrial Revolution was that we came to depend more than ever on the intellect and to ignore the intuition and its symbolic thinking. The creator and the mystic have tended more towards Platonism than Aristotelianism, and to be willing to accept Plato's divine madness with its 4 aspects of prophecy, healing, artistic creativity, and love. These divine madnesses have been nearly lost in this century, and so we've lived almost entirely in the pragmatic Cartesian world. I wonder, she says, if Descartes knew that what he was doing when he wrote his famous I think, therefore I am. And subsequently, if not consequently, we began even more than before to equate ourselves with our conscious minds. Cogito ergo sum, nudges us on to depend solely on intellectual control. And if we insist on intellectual control, we have to let go of our archaic understanding and our high creativity, because keeping them means going along with all kinds of things we can't control. She's an advocate for the artistic genius, the artistic madness, if you will, that lives within us, that is repressed very often by our insistence on the intellect. And the intellect's explanation of things, which is the ego. The function of the intellect when it's explaining stuff and creating value judgments about stuff. That's what we call ego. Now, she's not suggesting, and she'll get to this, and everybody who taught, and I was just reading Ernest Holmes saying very much the same thing in a book called Words That Heal Today. All of these writers who say these things, they hasten to add, now we're not saying do away with the intellect. We're not saying everybody just kind of go blank, mentally and just take it all in, subconsciously take it all in, intuitively. They're saying let the intellect know it's a tool. It's a tool. It's not the whole driving mechanism of who you are. How do you know this when you've been so carefully taught, so trained in the power of the intellect? How do you know this? Because you didn't create the intellect using your intellect, did you? Okay? Something came before. A lot was provided. And then we stepped into that. And we had people around us when we came to this life, and they told us how it was. And they said, now here's what you need to do. Here's what you need to do to get by in life. And we were given strategies. Some of these were explained to us, laid out in detail, put on a chalkboard, that kind of thing. And others of them were more signals and things that we picked up along the way. One of the signals most, if not all of us, picked up was look, in this life, look like you know what you're doing. Look like you know what you're doing. If you don't know what you're doing, that's okay, because not all of us do, but we don't admit it, except very carefully and privately to one another. So for the most part, when you're around other godlings, look like you know what you're doing. Look like you have all the answers. If somebody asks you a question and you don't know the answer, you learn a strategy. Don't say, I don't know. Change the subject, right? Just talk about the weather or anything else where you can hold forth with some degree of expertise. All of these different coping mechanisms that we picked up along the way are causing us to shrivel internally. And you're seeing this in the world. You're seeing these systems beginning to disintegrate. The dependence on the intellect alone. She mentions the Industrial Revolution, the dependence on the conquest and subjugation of nature, the conquest and subjugation of other people who are unlike the tribe that you belong to that decides that it's all right to go do this. These systems are collapsing by the day because something else is waiting to be born. So my topic actually this morning is, are we asking too much? And I mean that in two ways. One is, are we asking too much? The other is, are we asking too much? Are we asking too much? Are we asking too much? Get to the first one first. Are we asking too much? Are we asking too much of our spiritual practice? Are we asking too much of the stuff we talk about here all the time, like spiritual mind treatment and the different spiritual tools that we use? Are we asking too much of these? No. No, we're not. I'll tell you why. Because there's one life. That life is source. That life is all the life there is. This isn't about our creating an imaginary world in which everybody's all one. Wouldn't that be nice? But that's like an amusement park, That's like a theme park in the middle of reality. The truth of the matter is we are all one. We don't have to make ourselves all one. We don't have to drop back and start over and try the oneness thing out. No, we are all one. The problem is We've forgotten this, and in some cases we've been encouraged to forget it. So we're not asking too much of spiritual practice. We may be asking too much of religion, and there's a difference. And you hear this a lot now. People will say, well, they answer surveys and stuff this way. They'll say, well, I'm not religious, but I am spiritual. And that sounds, if you're not clear on what this is, it sounds hair splitting. It's like saying, well, I don't go to church, but I do go to a spiritual center. Well, there is a distinction between religious and spiritual. Here it is. Spirituality is about the inward journey that the self takes by itself. Religion is about the story that's told at the conclusion of the inward journey or somewhere along the way by multiple people having these experiences. Or multiple people who are not having these experiences but heard that somebody one time had them. I haven't looked within myself, but Jesus did. The Buddha did. Somebody out there did. And I'm reading about them here, and it's a story, and I believe the story. And if you believe it too, well, then we stand next to each other and we call ourselves a religion. Spirituality is the heart of religion. Not all spiritual people are religious. Not all religious people are spiritual. And I'm not here to advocate that you not be religious, but I am here to advocate that you be spiritual. And then see where that takes you. And maybe it takes you into a group of like-minded people, and maybe it takes you out under a tree someplace in a meadow where you just contemplate, and they're out under a moonlit sky where you just contemplate the eternity and everlastingness of everything, and you will have had just as valid a spiritual experience. Spirituality is about the intuitive, mad self, the uncontrollable self. When you go on a spiritual quest, the hero's journey, whatever you wish to call it, you have no control over what comes next. Like in the hero's journey, there are stages that people write about, but the stages can move around or other stages get inserted in there, and you don't know what's happening. That's the whole point of the thing, is you're surprised, you're astonished. Things come that you hadn't chosen, that you knew of. Things disappear that you weren't aware you'd released. Sometimes things happen, and you don't notice them for a while, but that they're an answer to prayer. Down the road, you go, hey, I've had this all along. I didn't know this was here. You ever do that? You ever go like digging through a drawer in your house, and you go, hey, this is useful. I found a gizmo the other day that turns a 1/8-inch plug into a iPhone plug on the other end. I have no idea whether I'm going to use it, but it's useful. And now I know I have it. Now I know I have it. And so I won't have to freak out if I get a device that needs to be moved from the one to the other and drive all over town and look for this thing. It's like, I have it there all along. That's great. We have all kinds of gifts. And I mean, that sounds like a small one, but look what we're doing today. This is tech dependent, a lot of what's happening at the center now. So the things that occur around us that are gifts and like bonuses, like lagniappe, right, Danielle? And so, things occur that we don't know. We don't know where this came from. We don't know. And living in the madness of the moment, living in the spiritual dimension, means you spend a lot of time in the dark, meaning you don't know what's coming next. What's coming next? Which drives the intellect nuts. Drives it nuts. Spirituality is about your interior process. And you come out of that. Maybe you're fortunate enough to find somebody else who has had a similar experience. And you share these things together. And you become like prayer buddies and stuff. Or you find a group of people, a larger group of people, and you create an adventure like Creative Life Spiritual Center. But sometimes what happens is that the experience that somebody's had goes to a level of, like, they're running on fumes, you know? They're not having the direct experience anymore. They're having the memory of the experience. Or they're having the memory of the memory of the memory of the experience. Or they're having the memory of having heard about the experience. And this is when religion gets strange, and religion becomes edgy, and religion becomes angry. It's like, because these promises have been made and nothing seems to be happening. I'm not looking within myself. I'm looking entirely out at the world. And the world doesn't seem to be shaping up the way I want it to. So I get angry about that. I decide who's to blame for that. And this is where holy wars come from. This is where blasphemy trials come from. Religion has done a lot of good in this world. An awful lot of good in this world. It's also done harm. Spirituality has never done harm. Never. Not to anyone. No one who has looked within themselves has experienced lasting harm. I'm not going to say they haven't been thrown a little, upset a little, moved around a little, but it's been good for you. It's been exercised. Your muscles hurt, you know, that kind of thing. And it's made us stronger and better in the long run. Spirituality has. Because religion, when it gets into judgment, it's really insidious. It posits the existence of a distant deity who has a set of rules that we, the elect, know about, and you, the uninformed and corrupt, need to be corrected by. Nobody can show their work with this thing because it's invisible and intangible. The source of all life is invisible and intangible, which is not a bad thing until you start quoting stuff in its name about how other people ought to behave, how other people ought to be treated and moved around. So I bring all of this up because I ardently believe it, and I bring it up because it's Pride Month. Because I was thinking about this. You know, I don't like to say always and never and make these kinds of statements and then have to retract them and say, well, you know, 80% of the time or 20% of the time this is true, or back it up. So I was thinking in the car on the way here this morning, and I may be wrong, but I'm going to put it out there, is that I don't think if there were not religion in this world, I don't think there'd be homophobia. Because I don't know where else it would come from. And there was an item actually in the paper this morning by a lesbian writer, and she quoted a poem. And I don't have the article in front of me or the whole poem, but you can look it up, or I can send you the link, or they're putting it on the thing now maybe. But she quoted a poem by another LGBT writer that talked about Godzilla. Godzilla, right? And it said, and I'm paraphrasing here after a quick read, so bear with. But the point of it was, here my beloved and I am. Like at a movie, in a restaurant, and Godzilla walks in between us, taking the form of a snotty comment, an eye roll, outright hostility, something that separates us, something that marginalizes us, and all we're doing is wanting to see a movie. All we're doing is wanting to enjoy a meal. Where does Godzilla get the power to do that? From a story that some people are wrong in how they love. Some people are wrong in how they identify. And religion did that. Oh, politicians trot along behind it and laws get floated, and there's all kinds of conversation about this at the civic level. But what drives it is an interpretation of Scripture that's warped, and relies on about 25 words altogether, which scholars think means something else anyway. So that's not what it's about. What it's about is you're different from me. And I don't know where to put that. Because my intellect is threatened by that. Because my intellect says there's one right way to be. My way. There's one right way to be in this world, the way I am. And if you're showing up over here as some different kind of way, then my intellect is threatened by that. My heart's not threatened by that. My intuitive nature's not threatened by that. My spiritual self's not threatened by that. But my story is threatened by that. Because I've been told there's one right way to be. And I was reading a piece the other day by a writer I don't agree with, who was saying that they didn't believe that people should, younger people particularly, should transition genders, have gender correction done, because, I said, God doesn't make mistakes. Okay? That's actually a line I've used before too, and you hear it in God doesn't make mistakes. Reverend Ike used to say God don't make junk. Okay? So I agree at that level, but I don't think correcting something means it was necessarily a mistake to start with. And I thought, what's an example of this I could use? I started out, and you did too, as a weak, helpless little infant. And we corrected that, didn't we? We grew. We knew nothing about this world. We started to get more information. We started to apply that information. And here we are working on ourselves. And if you have any kind of a spiritual program, well, that's about correction. We got a whole bookstore over there with which one day you'll see again soon. Have a section of self-improvement. Why? Why self-improve? God doesn't make mistakes. Why take anything back? You know? Why apologize? Why clean up incomplete communication? Why do any of this stuff? God doesn't make mistakes. Because there's a correction that is not universal, but personal. How do you feel in your body? How do you feel? That's what matters. How do you and your partner feel about the love that you share? That's what matters, not the rest of the world's opinion about it. And so it's a lot easier. And so I don't think we're asking too much when we say that we're one human family. And if this isn't already clear, let me make this point. You know, a teaching like ours, a center like ours, and what we stand for here, here's what we're not doing. We're not saying, I'm not saying, to our LGBTQIA plus friends and members of this center, we're not saying, look, we are so generous, we are so big-hearted in this place that we have agreed to overlook the dysfunctional being that you are. The God we believe in could judge you, send you to hell, but he's too nice a guy to do that, so he's not going to. He could, but he's not going to. That's not what we're saying. That's sometimes how it's heard. What we're saying is that kind of God never existed, but as a revenge fantasy. And we're saying that we don't welcome you here because we're overlooking a lot of stuff and we're generous and we're progressive and we're this and this. We're saying we welcome you here because there's never been anything wrong with you. There's never been anything wrong with you. And I know this is annoying sometimes to people who feel they've been told there was something wrong with them. And I don't mean just LGBTQIA plus people. I mean people who have had the shame culture, tell them that they're fundamentally wrong just for who they are. This is annoying to people because it's like, well, how many years did I spend trying to compensate for shortcomings I really don't have? And I'm sorry about that. And I'm sorry about the story that existed in the culture that you and I were born into that perpetuated that kind of thing. And we're doing what we can to dismantle that. But meanwhile, right here, today, what you can do is shake it off like old news, because it is. You are beautiful, whole, perfect, and complete. Complete but not finished. Complete but not over, see? And there's always more to do, and there's always more to become, and always more to learn. And you're going to keep improving. And when we leave this earth, and I kind of got into this last week, but when we leave this earth, my sense is, I don't know for sure, I haven't been there, but my sense is that we go on and we keep improving and we keep learning like forever. But today, right now, right here, you're not asking too much to take up your divine inheritance as the pure and perfect godling that you are. The other part of this, which is a lot shorter than the first part if you're keeping track, is are we asking too much? And there the answer is sometimes, yeah. When we're not accepting, appreciating, listening, receiving, dwelling in the house of the Lord, as Scripture puts it, and claiming and choosing and affirming. Sometimes we ask too much. Sometimes we go to the divine kind of hat in hand and we stand there sort of fumbling for words and we're like, if it be thy will, what would you have me do? In this teaching of science of mind, you and I are the experience that Spirit is having in this world at this time by means of us. What that means is there's no separation. There's no divine office that you have to go to and stand there in line and wait for your request to be fulfilled. It's more organic than that. It's more immediate than that. So yes, sometimes we do ask. Sometimes we put it off. Sometimes we don't want to deal with it. We say when the world's a better place, then I'll feel more comfortable. When the economy's better, when the pandemic is over, when something has happened, then I'll feel different about myself and, then I'll feel confident I can go forward. Time doesn't wait for us. Time doesn't wait for us. When it's okay with the rest of the world, that time never comes. For all of the creative people, we'll list a number. Here's some of their stories through her book and other things as we go on through this month. These creative people, they didn't wait. They couldn't wait. They couldn't wait for a hospitable environment across the board. They couldn't wait for the encouragement and approval of others. Look, people, not everybody's going to approve of you, no matter what. Not everybody's going to approve of you, including people who, by social covenant, should, like your own family. Not everybody's going to approve of you. But you can approve of you. And when you approve of yourself, people who join you in that come out of nowhere, seemingly, to stand with you. And I say that because there are plenty of people who've come into this center, actually or virtually, who have said, I had no clue that there were people out there who thought like I do. And how they attracted us to them was that they kept believing what they believed, thinking what they thought, and especially feeling what they felt. They stood in that, and they said, if nobody on the face of the earth agrees with me in this, it's still where I stand. And staking out that position, people came to that. It reminds me of something I quoted to you back months ago when we did the series on Neville Goddard's work, and how 2/3 of the way through his career, he changed his mind about some stuff, and he was lecturing to big halls full of people, and he changed his outlook, and how you can read about. Well, we'll talk about some other time. But he modified it. He didn't throw it all out. He just modified it some. And his handler or associate or whoever it was that he said this to said to him, oh, that's a terrible idea. You're going to lose your audience. And Neville replied, then I will speak it to the bare walls. Isn't that great? Then I will speak it to the bare walls, because it was his truth. So guess what? He didn't lose his audience. He gained an audience. He gained an audience because he stood in his truth. I'll close with this for today. There's You may have seen this. There's a bakery. There's a bakery in Lufkin, Texas. Do you know where Lufkin, Texas is? I like just say Lufkin. I like saying that. Lufkin, Lufkin, Lufkin. It's up 59. They came out with pride cookies. Heart-shaped rainbow cookies. Put them on their Facebook page. Baked a gazillion of these cookies. They lost all these followers on Facebook. They had some messages of hate on Facebook. And so they owned it. And they said, they told the world or the news media or something that this had been the reaction. In a real short period of time, day or two, they picked up over 2,000 new followers on Facebook, and the line stretched around the block for pride cookies in Lufkin, Texas. And there are pictures of this. Okay? When you stand in your truth, and when you stand not just in your story, but when you stand in the idea of oneness, even if it makes you uncomfortable because you're not sure who all these other people are, when you stand in that, the world will come stand with you. Lisa put a meme on our center Facebook page. I can't quote from memory, but it has to do with a Klingon. Okay. Curzon and, say it again?
Curzon is the Klingon, or Curzon was the original character, and then Jadzia is the new incarnation.
Jadzia?
Jadzia.
Okay.
And then Kor is the Klingon.
Okay. So Kor is a Klingon. You ever watch this stuff? Okay. Klingons have a very, I know this much, Klingons have a very bad reputation. They're considered quite edgy, and they're kind of orc-like if you're into the, Tolkien stuff. And so Kor says to Curzon, Curzon, my old friend, and throws a hug on Curzon, and Curzon says, I'm now Jadzia. And Kor says, Jadzia, my old friend. That's how it can work. No astonishment, no weird, no what happened here, no where do I put this, A simple self-correction, but inside the self, I can't tell you other people aren't going to make you uncomfortable from time to time by being who they are. That's part of the growth process. That's part of the growth process. But stand in your belief that whatever you're encountering, especially if people are angry with you, oppositional with you, stand in your belief that this person is a godling just like you, entitled to all the greatest gifts of life. If you can think of your worst enemy, if, God forbid, you have a worst enemy, if there's somebody who's hurt you, if you can think of this person and wish for them and know for them the same good that you desire in your life, watch out. Get ready for some amazing good to happen. So that's enough for today. The book, again, is called Walking on Water by Madeleine L'Engle, available wherever it is you buy books. Reflections on Faith and Art. And I will see you again next week.
All right. I get the follow-up and the closing treatment, and there's a whole lot. And please go look at the meme. If you're not familiar with Star Trek, one of the reasons why I like it so much is because Curzon was male and Jadzia is female. That's what makes that meme so a simple correction. But today is June 6th. I am married to a history buff. Like, his degree is in history. He loves history. He particularly loves military history. So I'm sitting here looking at the date going, why does this date mean something? What is so important about June 6th? It's D-Day. Today is the day when the Allies made a push which cost a whole lot of lives, but turned the course of the war. And we remember it for a variety of reasons, among them being a whole lot of lives were lost, but also because it was the day that the Allies stood together. Now, it was a day, but it took months of planning, and it was months of continued work past that one day that turned the tide. It was the day when the world made the push to say, we will not go quietly into this autocratic, fascist future that a small contingent was pushing for. The rest of the world went, no. And here's what we're going to do about it. So D-Day, which apparently D, when I was looking it up, simply stands for day. So it's day. Just to give you a moment to go, wait, what? D-Day it's a day we can't ever afford to forget, because we don't ever want to do it again, which means when small, loud voices start to stand up and say, this is the way the world is, the rest of the world can say, no. The rest of the world can stand up and say, no, this world is made in love. We are going to live in love. We are going to love in one another, and we are going to stand in oneness. We are going to say that every one of us has value, because we are all children of God. That's what D-Day is. And so in that knowing, I know that there is one life, one power, one presence, one love. And I stand in that presence, and I stand in that love, and I stand in that power. And I speak my word. No, I declare my word. That we are children of God. That every single one of us is valued, is loved. And that we know that love, that we feel that love, and that love flows from within to without. It flows out of us to each and every one of us. That we speak in the voice of love. That we act in love. That we do in love. That in the back of all the things that we speak, think, act, and do, love is the driving force. Love is the motivation. This is what I know. This is what I declare. This is what I am grateful for. And in this gratitude, in this love, I know. And I hear that still small voice within me that says, you are mine. And I hear it for you too. And I relax, and I release, and I know that it is so, and so it is.